Assalamu alaikum, peace be upon you. I'm very glad to welcome you to tonight's event. My name is Yunus Salman. I'm Religious Education Chair of the Islamic Society, and this is going to be the second event of our lecture series on the basics of Islam. We had our first talk on belief 2 weeks ago, and tonight we're going to be talking on prayer. With Sohail Hanif. I'm going to introduce him quickly. Sohail Hanif graduated in 2000 with a bachelor's degree in Information Systems Engineering from Imperial College London, so a very minor university, but I still accept him. After that, he spent an extended...
I repented.
We're not elitists, by the way. So after that, he spent an extensive period in Jordan as a student and teacher of Arabic and Islamic studies. He is currently a DPhil student in Oriental Studies at the University of Oxford, so he came to the good side, where his thesis studies legal change in Arabic fatwa and the construction of authority in classical Islamic legal thought, focusing on the Central Asian Hanafi tradition. So we are very happy to welcome you today here. The format of this talk is going to be as follows. He will speak for about 40-45 minutes, depending on how long you want. And after that, we'll have basically until 7:30 for questions, and we can also add early if there's no further need for questions. So, Sohail Hanif, start off.
Thank you very much. Bismillahirrahmanirrahim. Alhamdulillahi Rabbil Alameen. Sallallahu wa sallam ala Sayyidina Muhammad wa ala alihi wa sahbihi wa sallam. Assalamu alaikum. Welcome everybody. For this small coverage about the topic of prayer in Islam, I will endeavor not to speak too much and just introduce the topic in its dimensions enough that perhaps we can have a meaningful exchange thereafter. I've got a number of caveats to mention before starting. Before mentioning the caveats though, just to quickly make sure we know what we're talking about, when we talk about prayer in Islam, there's two very distinct concepts which both can translate as prayer. One is the Arabic word salah, S-A-L-A-H, if you wanted to write it in English, letters, which is what we're actually talking about here, and I will translate it henceforth as ritual prayer, which is the basic ritual Muslims, it is the single most central injunction or practice in the faith of Islam, which Muslims perform 5 times a day. The word prayer can also be used as a translation for another Arabic word called dua, literally meaning calling, which is often translated as supplication, which is what is normally thought of as prayer in a general faith discourse, which is basically speaking to God, asking Him for your needs, and so on. And so the focus here is on the ritual prayer, which is, like I said, this most fundamental tenet and practice of the Islamic faith. And it's a topic which obviously justice cannot be done to in this short time. And there's a number of reasons for this, which I shall summarize some of. First of all, it's my personal belief anyway, that the ritual prayer of Islam is a microcosm of the entire Islamic faith. And it contains within it a tremendous store of insights into the very vision of Islam for the individual, for society, how people relate to each other, how societies should be organized. There's a tremendous amount that can be teased out of the details of the ritual prayer, which is why it's such a huge topic as such, which we cannot possibly touch on all of. Secondly, the discussion of the ritual prayer in the Islamic tradition, you will find it typically shared amongst 3 genres of writing, or 3 scholarly activities, if you like, which talk about the prayer. The first and the foremost, really, in many ways, is what I'm going to call the juristic discourse, the legal discourse. The legal discourse is devoted utterly and completely to rules because it is a ritual act. There's do's and there's do-nots. There's things that must be observed, things which cannot happen. Otherwise, you have to repeat the prayer. You've broken the rule, and so on. anyone who comes to the prayer, whether as a new Muslim, whether as a child growing up in a Muslim family, always the first entry into the prayer is to rules. What does it mean to pray, to make it valid, to make it correct? What do you do? It's about things that you have to do. Those who document the doings of the prayer, the rites and rituals, are what I'm calling the jurists, the scholars of law. And typically and traditionally, if somebody wants to be a lawyer in the Islamic tradition, an expert in law and jurisprudence, this would entail, in addition to learning about marriage and divorce and trade and so on, contracts, it would also entail studying hundreds and hundreds of pages from several texts, all about the prayer. It's part of the legal discourse. And so, as I'm indicating, there's a lot that goes on here in the juristic discourse of the prayer. Another discourse, another form of discourse, which has extensive writings in the Islamic tradition about the prayer, is what we can call the mystical discourse, where there are writings about the spiritual meanings of the prayer, not so much about simply do's and don'ts and validity and invalidity, but what should come to your mind when you say this, when you do that, when you enter this, when you enter that. What makes a prayer acceptable to God, i.e., in terms of what's in your heart. Such treatises, such forms of discourse will typically tie the prayer to the larger discussions of a person's spiritual journey to God. So they'll talk about when you prostrate, this is your annihilation in the being of God, there's nothing there but God. When you sit up, this is representative of returning back to the world, and so on. It's a form of second layer of interpretation which ties the ritual acts to the larger spiritual journey of a person to God. A third form of discourse, also in the Islamic tradition, also about the prayer, the ritual prayer, is what I can simply call the historical discourse. And what I mean by this, quite specifically, is basically a summary and a gathering of utterances of pious early figures of the Islamic faith and how they describe their own prayers and how they experience their own prayers. So it's a form of historical documentations of sayings and events and happenings in people's lives which are part of illustrating what a real prayer is meant to be. So you'll have stories of, for example, somebody with some iron shrapnel or an arrowhead in their body which has to be operated on, and people are wondering, well, how can we remove it with minimum discomfort to this individual? And the person replying, oh, do it when I'm praying, because that's when he's least likely to feel anything. Or a person who's praying and the mosque around him in the old city of Basra or Kufa, the walls collapse, and the person keeps praying, and at the end they ask him, well, didn't you realize that the mosque was about to collapse? He goes, no, I didn't really notice that. Or, for example, sayings even from the time of the Prophet himself. One of his companions is praying in his large garden or grove. The old city of Medina was basically an agricultural economy, so wealth was about the groves that you had where you grow dates primarily. And a person in his wonderful garden praying, and he starts thinking about the garden and gets distracted and gets so upset with himself for having gotten distracted that he tells the Prophet, I'm giving this whole thing in charity as a form of atonement between him and God. Or, for example, the saying of the Prophet himself about a garment that I believe was gifted to him, at the end of the prayer saying, take it back to so-and-so because it distracted me when I was praying. It had some kind of intricate pattern of some sort. So that's a quick introduction then of what I'm calling forms of discourse or forms of literature that for us are the summary then of the Muslim experience in written form of the ritual prayer. That's one reason why it's hard to touch on all of it, because there's so much here that has been written and discussed and theorized that is of relevance to us in understanding its place within the Islamic faith. The other part that makes this prayer such a large topic to talk about, as you can see, my caveats are half the talk. But, all is part of part that makes this topic so big to talk about is it brings together, within its short observation, and what do I mean by short observation? I mean the 5 obligatory prayers, if somebody prays them in a day, we're talking about, 15 minutes of their day to half an hour, depending on, how much time they want to devote to it. So the very minimum amount is not a huge, a part of one's day as such. But this ritual brings within it very key aspects of the Islamic faith, each of which have a very lengthy discourse, again, associated with it, and a very lengthy discussion of it. And so the prayer, part of the ritual prayer, what does it consist of? It consists, first of all, of the remembrance of God, which in Arabic, the word for this is dhikr. And those of you who are aware of, the mystical writings of Islam, this is at the very heart of the entire spiritual path, is the remembrance of God. And so you start by saying, God is greatest, Allahu Akbar, which is even more from CNN, crazy also to wear of. When you bow, you say, Subhana Rabbiyal Azim, which is above all deficiency, beyond all unfitting descriptions, is my cherishing Lord, the all-tremendous. When you prostrate, you say, above and beyond all deficiency and all unfitting descriptions is my nurturing Lord, the Most High, and so on. There are forms of remembrance of God which take place during this ritual prayer. And the remembrance of God, like I said, it's a very extensive topic. There's many hadiths and verses of the virtue and importance of remembering God in general. One hadith says, remember God a lot until they say that you're crazy, because your lips are always moving when you're walking around on the street. And so the prayer enshrines within its short ritual this key aspect of the Islamic faith and Islamic practice. Another central aspect of general Islamic practice, which is enshrined within the acts of the prayer, is the recitation of the Holy Quran. And so a person, when standing in the prayer, all they're doing is reciting Quran from whatever they've memorized. There's a key chapter that every single cycle of the prayer has to have, otherwise the prayer is not considered correct or offered, which is the opening 7 verses of the Quran, known as the opening of the book, or Surah Al-Fatiha, sometimes described as the Muslim version of the Lord's Prayer. The very summary of this opening chapter is simply praising God, thanking Him, declaring servitude to Him, and begging Him for guidance. This is basically it. So every cycle of the prayer has to have this for it to be correct. So this chapter is the prayer in many respects, and it's been called the chapter of the prayer, and it deserves its own coverage. The various meanings and dimensions of this core recitation of the Holy Quran, and Quranic recitation in general is a topic which deserves some discussion. I.e. the Quran not just as a rule book of do's and don'ts, but the Quran as a spiritual exchange, where one is conversing with God through the recitation. The prayer contains that within it, and it deserves its own discussion. Recitation as worship. The prayer also contains within it a very central aspect of Islamic practice, which is the dua, the other meaning of prayer, which I mentioned earlier on, supplication. So we are told when prostrating, for example, to ask God for whatever one's needs are, to speak to Him. Or in the final sitting, before finishing the prayer, likewise, to ask God for one's needs. And likewise, after finishing the prayer, we're recommended to sit there, raise our hands and ask, because it's a time when supplications are answered. And so, supplication is its own topic of the relationship between a person and God. In the prophetic tradition, it's been called the very marrow, the very essence of worship is begging God for your needs. So the ritual prayer contains this within its various rituals, the speaking with God and the asking Him of one's various needs, a topic that really needs its own discussion as well, of the Islamic understanding of this. The ritual prayer, to continue, also contains a very central topic with a very large discourse around it and writings and theorizing, which is the sending of prayers and blessings upon the Prophet. So in the final sitting, before exiting from the prayer, what we've been told to say, is, "O God, bless Muhammad and the family of Muhammad, like you blessed Abraham and the family of Abraham. You are all praiseworthy and all majestic." And then again, "O Lord, send," another synonym for blessings, "send," I'll just say, "more blessings upon Muhammad and the family of Muhammad, like you sent them upon Abraham and the family of Abraham." And so again, this is a discussion of its own, the devotional connection of the believer to his prophet, as well as the larger connection of this prophet in the larger sphere of prophethood, as a large part of the human story between the individual and God, and Abraham as this father of all this great prophetic tradition, and we're asking this prophet to be blessed like that father of the prophets was blessed as we finish the prayer. This is a topic of its own, with its own discussions and depth that is due to it. There's a very small point, just to finish this caveat, is also that within the prayer is a greeting, again when one is sitting, to the Prophet of Islam, and then to the righteous. We're saying, we send a wishing of peace upon all the righteous slaves of God. And so there's again this view the prayer gives, which is, as we'll be seeing it again further on shortly, which is this essential, standing before God, conversing with God, glorifying God, asking for one's needs, but within that, a reminder of the righteous slaves of God and one's wishing of peace for them, and then a reminder of one's connection to the Prophet and the prophets. So these are some of the dimensions within which the prayer exists and revolves, which is why it's impossible to give this talk. Thanks. But having said that, and having your forgiveness then for this impossible task, what I want to focus on today, again, as I said in the beginning, just as an introduction to the topic, to give an insight of what the Muslim experience of ritual prayer is, and hopefully to lay a foundation for some conversation and discussion afterwards. I want to focus most primarily, above these various levels of discussion that I hinted at in the beginning, on what I call the juristic discourse, which is the discourse really to do with rules and regulations. And the reason why I want to give that a bit more of a focus than everything else of the different forms of discussion here is because, first of all, it is the first entry into this topic. If somebody were to become Muslim today, right now, what do they have to, assuming they've become a Muslim, so they believe in God, they understand the basic tenets, they want to be a Muslim, what's the first thing you have to tell them? Oh, there is a prayer time, which is either you became Muslim in a prayer time or the prayer time that's about to happen. So the very first thing you learn is, do you know how to wash yourself properly? Do you know how to pray properly? Well, pray with me then, and so on. So the very first entry into the faith is through the rules. And the very first entry to the prayer is through the rules. And so it is the doorway through which one always enters into the topic of the ritual prayer. Secondly, because the meanings of what I'm calling the juristic discourse, the discourse of rules and regulations, the meanings and the lessons and the depth of which, I feel there's a great deal of depth here, is something that all Muslims experience. And I like to say it like that. There's a lot of very deep spiritual meanings that can be connected to the prayer, which is fine, it's wonderful, but you might not meet people that experience that form of, high communion with God. And it doesn't feel like a real conversation anymore. The people who are around you and are praying, what are they experiencing? What are they getting out of it? And so I wanted to give a bit more of a focus then on this simple level, almost. What is the prayer in the life of the people who pray? Whoever and whatever they are, and whoever and whatever their aspirations in life are, what does the prayer mean to them if they observe it? And I feel that the discourse of rules and regulations gives us an insight into that, as I hope we will be seeing. And so through this very simple coverage, then, I'd like to say simply then what the prayer means then to the individual, and what the prayer means for the group, the community of faith. And I think that prayer speaks very directly to both of these, if one understands the rules that it connects with it. And then briefly at the end, I'll give some hints to these other, what I mentioned, the mystical, what calls it, the historical discourse. So, caveat, I've taken up half the talk. So, the dimensions of the prayer then. Okay, just to give an idea of what we mean by this ritual prayer. So, when you learn about the ritual prayer, as a child, as a new Muslim, as someone who wants to practice their faith, and this is, like I said, the most central practice, so it always will be coming first. What you learn about is, first of all, the ritual ablution. Washing oneself before one prays, which is about washing the, primarily, face, arms, wiping the head, washing the feet, which is the interesting one. You learn about prayer times. Prayers are always observed in particular times. What are the times? The prayer direction. The prayer is offered in a particular direction, which is the Kaaba, or the cube in Mecca, which in the Islamic faith is believed to have been built by Abraham and his son Ishmael. These are considered prerequisites of the ritual prayer, and so you learn about them. And then the prayer itself essentially consists of standing and bowing and prostrating, putting the forehead on the ground, and sitting. These are the 4 postures of the prayer. One goes through them a number of times, depending on the prayer of the day. Sometimes there's 2 cycles of this, sometimes 3 or 4 cycles of this for the basic prayer. And like I mentioned, there are particular forms of remembrance of God that one has to utter. There is some Quranic recitation. One chapter you have to recite, and others you have an option to add on. And then you learn about recommended elements of the prayer, which normally are further utterances, which you can learn and recite, and ways to perfect the bowing, perfect the prostrating, perfect the sitting, so you do it as perfectly as possible. And then one learns about things which are disliked or invalidate the prayer. These things which what does it mean to invalidate? Because it is a ritual practice, and so you have to have performed it. If you do something which goes against the ritual practice and you're told, then do it again, because the ritual practice has been violated. What are the things which invalidate the prayer, first of all? They're either going against these conditions, you didn't bow, you didn't prostrate, you didn't wash yourself before praying, so obviously you have to do that and pray again. Or it's doing something which is considered going completely against the subject matter of the prayer. For example, speaking. And so when one is standing in prayer, the speech is only between the individual and God. There's no other person that can get involved right now. If a person is to speak and say, yes please, no thank you, 2 sugars in mine, or something of that sort, we're told, fine, but you've got to start again. That's not what the prayer is about. It's about standing before God, and the conversation is only with Him. Eating and drinking likewise. If one eats or drinks, you're welcome to eat and drink, but you have to pray again, because this is not what the prayer is about. The other thing is excessive movement, which again jurists have debated how to define it, but the idea is one is standing humbly before God. And so what is deemed excessive movement shows one is not really praying right now. So one has to start again without this excessive movement. This is a very quick overview of what invalidates, meaning it's considered completely going against the subject matter of the prayer, so you have to pray again. Then there's another list of activities which you're told are disliked in the prayer, meaning one should really avoid them. Some are really, 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 really disliked, and some you can say are disliked. But one is told one needs to avoid them for one's prayer to have its maximum benefit and maximum reward with God. And if you look at the various list of things, they basically return back to 2 meanings that come again and again and again in the various scenarios. One is avoiding anything that indicates arrogance or irreverence before God. And so they'll talk about things like carefully protecting one's garments before prostrating, i.e., as if, you're too good for your clothes to touch the ground or something, and you want to make sure everything is, as least contact happens. Again, it's not because the ground might be dirty, It's because of this idea one is above the ground almost. Another really interesting concept one finds in medieval law books, they talk about a male who has long hair, right? He leaves it open all the time, but when prostrating, he ties his hair up when praying. And what they mention is this is disliked. Why? Because he doesn't want his hair to touch the ground. It's not about the idea of avoiding dirt or not. The idea is he wants to stay aloof as much as possible. And so the law books always emphasize, no, you can't stay aloof. Prostrating before God is what a person is aspiring to do, and it's the most central position of the prayer. They'll talk about things like if one is prostrating on gravel, one only should move the gravel aside once before prostrating, just to make sure that one can prostrate, there's no pebbles and so on. One shouldn't do it again and again, they say. Why? A, because it's fiddling, right? It's excess motion, which I'll come to shortly. And A, because it shows that one is somehow above prostrating on gravel. And the prayer isn't founded on that. The prayer one learns from these juristic discussions, it's all about being as humbled and as lowly as possible before the person of God. This is the essence of it. So there's a large number of statements like, again, cases is what the early jurists primarily delved in. They'll say, for example, this way you stand with your hands on your hips. Now, typically people stand with their arms folded or by their sides. But they specify this position because it shows, what on earth are you doing? It's not prayer. It's symbolic. It's symbolic of irreverence and symbolic of a form of being above what the prayer is. So there's a number of cases of this sort, which clearly bring to account then any form of being aloof, being above, being proud, being irreverent is disliked. And there's a large number of cases again that show that any form of distractedness is disliked. Even, for a human need. So for example, if you're dying to use the bathroom. So what these law books will mention is you really must break the prayer. So you're praying, but you really want to go. Then what they'll say is you have to break the prayer. So just break it, do what you have to do, come back and start again. But there's no way you can know what you're doing if you have a physical need of such a sort. Or they'll talk about the dislikeness of praying in the presence of food that you really want to eat. Because you're a human. So eat your food, relax. When you're ready, come back and pray. And so there's a number of issues of this sort. And so what you really get out of this very rocket-fast coverage, what I'm calling the juristic discourse, is you actually learn a lot about the very basic meaning of the prayer that all people experience who pray. Whether they understand the deeper meanings of what's recited and uttered or not, the basic meaning of the prayer that all Muslims experience, because that is what the rules encapsulate, is that the prayer is ultimately standing humbled before God. That's it. And prostrating humbly before God. That is the essence of the entire ritual prayer. Its postures speak to one, whether one is present of heart with the words or not. Its stillness and its directedness and its silence from all other than it speaks to one. Whether one is present with what is beyond that or not. The ritual prayer is a tremendous act of discipline of just this one idea. Being humble, being silenced, being before the tremendous being of God. And standing there and coming back to that throughout the day. Every day of a person's life. Humbleness before God, there's an Arabic word for this, which often comes in discussions of the prayer, which is khushu', which is, like I said, I'm only going to call it humbleness. In the Arabic language, they say khasha'a basaruhu, his eye had khushu', what it meant was he's looking at the ground. Khasha'at al-aswat, it says on Judgment Day, within the Quran, voices are humbled before God on Judgment Day. What is it? Silence. فَلَا تَسْمَعُ إِلَّا هَمْسًا. You don't hear on Judgment Day except like a whimper. Everything is silenced. Everyone's in awe. So this is the idea of khushu' as an Arabic term. Voices are humbled, the sight is humbled, the limbs are humbled. This is the most basic meaning of the prayer as a ritual act as experienced by anybody who prays. Isolation, alienation, all of us will experience something of this in our lives. And the prayer is there 5 times a day as one is experiencing all of this. The prayer doesn't have a time when it's not there. And that's what, again, for me, is one of the most fascinating aspects of the ritual prayer, is exactly this. It's not something that takes place in a particular setting. You know, darkened room, candlelight, feeling calm, nice aroma, and so on. It's there always. You'll be traveling sometimes and you have to find a place to pray. You'll be at work, you may take a lunch break, you quickly want to get your prayer done, so you come back to your desk. It's there throughout your life. Whatever you do, you're in labor, and they talk about prayer in labor before the child comes out. Obviously, it's no standing, it's no frustrating. But they talk about it. You know, if you can't stand, then you lie down. You can't wash your limbs, and you do a dry ablution with like a stone or something. If you scream from pain, then that's not considered speech. It was uncontrollable. They actually talk about this. It's the prayer is always, 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 always there, whatever a person does in their life. That's really, really powerful. Why is it really, really powerful? Because the prayer is not something we choose then, where it happens or how it happens and what mood we're in. The prayer is just the companion of the believer, wherever the person is. And as the years go by in a person's life, one grows tremendously by the prayer in ways that one couldn't have grown just by reading or thought. Because why? Again, I'm just talking about the ritual observation at this stage. Because you'll have times when you're at work and you know it's time to pray, but you were chatting with your friend and you got distracted and you missed the prayer. And you think about it and you think back and you know what? I could have prayed then. I could have dissociated myself. I could have been more assertive or more clear or more thoughtful or more strategic. One thinks about things. One thinks about, because the prayer, it starts, the basic dhikr, I mentioned as part of the prayer, the remembrance of God. As you start the prayer is Allahu Akbar, which is God is greater than everything. And every time you move, you say Allahu Akbar. So you go out, Allahu Akbar. You stand up, there's another remembrance, but you prostrate, Allahu Akbar. Sit up, Allahu Akbar. Sit up, Allahu Akbar. So Allahu Akbar is the accompanying dhikr, which comes from the beginning until the end of the prayer. God is greater than everything. And as one goes through life, one will sometimes fail in the cases that I've mentioned. One will oversleep. One might sleep late. One didn't set the alarm. And then one thinks about it and says, well, I could have done this better. Obviously, now what happens is if you ever miss a prayer, then you're told to make it up, outside of the time. So the assumption is if a person ever misses a prayer, they will make it up. But they'll always think about it. The ritual demands this of a person. And so what does the prayer become really? Just as an act of ritual, it becomes a school for this person. It becomes a companion for this individual on his life journey, where the person will reflect on his failures and his successes in just offering the ritual. He was in a particular place. Was he afraid of people or not? To say, excuse me, I need to say my prayers. Do you mind if I just say my prayers there in the corner or not? There's a lot happening as a person succeeds and fails in the act of prayer. The prayer is a very practical reminder to an individual that God is watching this individual. Why? Because sometimes there's a mild inconvenience in prayer. You have to perform the ritual ablution. No one's going to know but you and God whether you have to do this. But the fact that you take the trouble to find a bathroom, to close the door, to wash your face and wash your feet is the tricky one. Who is telling you to do this? No one knows but you and God. And that's what is so interesting about the prayer again. It's just your devotion that no one's involved in, no one can be, because no one's going to be there. And so the ritual is teaching this individual something that no mere discourse and discussion will teach this person, which is life with God, always and always, wherever one is, for the sake of performing this ritual throughout one's day, every day of one's life. And so this is something one finds generally in the Islamic faith, or at least the teachings of the Prophet, which is that what he primarily did can be described as using the hand to teach the heart. And so you find that the Islamic tradition has a very deep discourse about the mystical meanings of almsgiving, of prayer, of recitation, of. You know, it's a very elaborate mystical discourse that the tradition has. But the Prophet of Islam himself, he indicated this, but what he taught was ritual, and a sense of the sacred in these rituals. While obviously the constant reminder that religion is all about a person and God. You know, the Quran is always about God. Everything's about God. And so what you find in the prophetic teachings then is a lot about God as the ultimate and the whole purpose of everything in a person's life, and a sense of the sacred in the rituals and the injunctions of God. And that's basically the prophetic teachings, really, just in a summary. And what happens thereafter is you live life. You, the individual, live life, thinking of God and practicing these rituals. And as you do that, you learn, and you grow, and you think, and you observe yourself. And that's why the prayer isn't a destination, the prayer is a journey. The prayer is a journey on which your companion is the prayer. This is what the whole prayer is about. And I'd like to suggest that this is what it means to all Muslims. Because what I'm saying is nothing more than what I keep stressing, the juristic ritual discourse. I'm not going into any of the deeper meanings at this stage of the words, of the utterances, of the Fatiha, of the begging for guidance, of the prostration before God. Just very simply, observing the prayer is a school. And it's the essence of what it means to live life, at least in the Islamic faith, in faithfulness to God. And learning about oneself, about one's failures, about one's successes, and turning to God throughout. And because of this, one finds that if you were to ask Muslims about the prayer, you will find typically, again just an average answer, what I imagine you would find is they'll say a lot of times they are distracted. Because why? Because I said the prayer's everywhere. It's just throughout your day. So if you just messed up at work and the time has come to pray, you will, if you were a Muslim who prays, you will go to pray. And for most of us, what will be on your mind is what on earth are you going to tell your boss? How do you keep your job? And that, for most people, will be on their minds while praying. But that's part of what I said, prayer is this companion. That its very postures and its rules speak to the soul, even if the heart and the mind at times is very, very distracted because of life, that the prayer is an accompaniment to. But you will also find, I think this is a general statement, I think, about Muslims who pray, that in their prayer they have moments where they're overcome by a sense of awe, or a sense of love, or a sense of longing, or a sense of realization, or a verse really hit them. And so the experience of prayer is all of this. Its distraction is as important as its concentration, because what is it? It's going through life. The prayer is just there with you as you go through life. In the Quranic injunction, the Quran says, وَاسْتَعِينُوا بِالصَّبْرِ وَالصَّلَاةِ إِنَّ اللَّهَ مَعَ الصَّابِرِينَ. Seek help, again, in life. With what? With patience and prayer. God is with the patient. And so that's it. You know, prayer is this recourse that people will turn to as they go through life. And I think observant Muslims, again, will be able to tell you this. It's not an abstract conversation. And there's many forms of prayer. So there's the obligatory prayer, which is what I've mentioned to you all, 5 times a day, theoretically 15 minutes to half an hour to 40 minutes of the day, depending on the individual. And there's recommended prayers that come along with these. There's further prayers a person can do. The night prayer before the break of dawn is highly recommended. There's a guidance prayer you've been recommended to us. Again, it's a ritual prayer, and then at the end you pray for guidance in a choice, like marrying someone or getting a job or so on. There's the prayer for need, which is again a ritual prayer one offers and then makes a particular supplication for help in a particular need of one. But the prayer is this idea, it's a support in the life of the believer, and I feel people would say that this is what they feel. Another thing I'll mention of prayer as companion is it's an odd, like I said, it is a companion. I really feel that. My parents are retired. They don't have anything they do, they just read all day. And I know for a fact the most important thing that gives their life meaning is their prayer, because it organizes their, you wake up early to pray, you sleep at a particular time, I've got to pray in the morning, at noon you think, I have to pray. Although it doesn't take up a large amount of the day, it is that thing which gives your day meaning. When you're retired and the whole life is about to finish, you'll be surprised. I've seen it. It is your companion in a way that, outside of that, obviously they read the Quran and they do other forms of devotion. But the prayer has this organizing skeletal presence that organizes their day and gives their life meaning. That's all I wanted to say then about an individual and what the individual gets out of the prayer, focusing on the ritual itself. I wanted to say just a few words about the social dimensions of the prayer. The prayer, again, is an extremely social event. Why is that? Okay, it seems weird to call it a social event. Why is that? It's because there's a huge encouragement to pray in a group. And so, if we here were about to pray, there's immense emphasis is given for us praying together, lining up in lines. Somebody will lead, that person will recite, and beautiful recitation is praiseworthy, and it becomes a group activity, the prayer itself. The building of mosques, which is the most fundamental social institution of Islam, wherever Muslims have been, mosques have been, it's there to establish this ritual prayer. Fundamentally, the 5 prayers of the day, it's a place where the community comes together to stand before God. And so the prayer, and even if you're at home, husbands and wives, they're recommended to pray together and not to pray separately, and children and parents, and the whole family structure. If you're not going to the mosque, your emphasis is try and pray together. It's not about being separate, it's about being together, which might seem odd in the light of some of the things that I've mentioned today, which is this solitary communion between the individual and God. But the prayer, again, the rules have this other dimension to them, which is the community of faith. And what the prayer really then comes when studying these rules, it is the pillar of the individual in his life or her life, a life of faith, a life of just living life with God in it. So it's a pillar of the group, of the social dynamic, that it's about being before God together, looking out for each other in the prayer. And so the prayer of the mosque becomes a time when you see where so-and-so, are they sick, let's visit them, but it's a time when the community comes, the community is aware of each other in the act of prayer, which necessarily has other social dimensions. That's what people always complain about mosque, is that there's all this chatting that happens outside. Because that's part of what happens. You've come to pray, so obviously you don't always walk out in silence. But that's again, this very strong social push, which is why I said the prayer for me is a microcosm of the faith, of the Islamic faith. I think there's a lot in it for a view of society, and a view of humans, and even, although I have to prove this, a view of political organization, if you like. Part of the ritual of the prayer is obviously Friday prayers, where the community, a large group of the community is told to come together. There is a sermon, and there is a prayer that's offered. There are Eid prayers that happen twice a year on the Eid festival, which is like our Christmas. That's why I tell my daughter anyway. And in this, our Christmas, what's recommended is not even praying in the mosque. It's going out into the fields. It is now getting more popular in England. Now people, going out to parks and things. The reason it's hard in England because of so much rain. But the point of going out to the field is what's bringing everyone then. Women and children and the whole bunch. It's going out, and then in the open, and then there's again a prayer and a sermon and a meeting that takes place. There's a very interesting idea of prayers for rain, which used to happen a lot in, which still happen in countries that Nidren, which again, if you read the old book, it's fascinating, but leaving town while fasting, forgiving each other, addressing wrongs, taking animals, taking children, and everyone is just there begging for rain, basically. Again, it's a social dimension as well as the spiritual dimension. And so just to conclude then what I've been saying then, which is everything I feel able to say at this stage, is that the entire goal of the Muslim faith is to tie the heart to God. But what's at the heart of this is tying the heart to God in the thick and thin of life. This is the heart of it. In the mystical discourse, they talk about the highest level of spiritual attainment, which is combining what they call mujahada with mushahada. Mujahada from jihad. The idea is that the thick and thin of life, struggling for justice, struggling with one's kids, struggling at work, struggling with the struggles of life, while being observant of God simultaneously. Not letting these things distract one from God, and not letting God distract one from life and one's duties. In the Islamic faith and in the mystical discourse, this is always seen as the ultimate. This is the prophetic rank, where one is in the world and not of the world, simultaneously. And the ritual prayer is very much a part of this. With its rules, its postures, its recitation, its glorification, its times, its group dimension. It's the individual and the community's time to live this ideal and to be on their own journey in improving this prayer as they go through life. And that's why the prayer is the pillar of the entire faith, and that's a prophetic statement. As-salatu imad-ud-din, the prayer is the support of the faith, completely and utterly. And so all I've been able to present here really is what can be learned by observance of the actual prayer, doing it. What are the spiritual meanings of the prayer? I think what the tradition will answer by, ultimately, is simply by saying, well, why don't you pray and see? Because everyone is on their own journey. Everyone has their own aspirations in life. Some of us have higher spiritual aspirations, some of us have slightly lower spiritual